Hello and welcome to JavaScript language syntax. So let's look at the objective of this section. So after completing this section, you will be able to understand the language basics like identifiers, variable and constants, primitive data types, keywords and reserved words. Then we'll look at the operators that we have like assignment, logical, string, quotes, boolean arrays and date and time. Then we'll look at some of the statements in JavaScript like if statement, switch statement, while and for loop. Okay, so this is the lectures that we're going to learn in this section. So after this section you will basically be able to understand how to write JavaScript code. All right, so let's jump into the topic now. Hello and welcome to the lecture on identifiers. Let's look at what are identifiers first and what is the name that identifiers means. When someone say identifiers in any programming language, they're basically referring to the name that is given to variable, functions, objects, properties and events. Alright, so this is basically a name that you give to variable, function, objects, properties and events. So remember that identifiers are just the naming standards that you are giving to any variable, function, objects or any of the events. Okay, but there are some rules when you define an identifier, because identifier is your name that you give in the programming language. So there are some rules that you can use when defining the identifiers. The identifiers can only contain letters, numbers, underscore and dollar sign. You cannot start an identifier with a number, and identifiers are case sensitive. It is very important to understand this. We're going to do exercise to understand that identifiers are case sensitive. Means you cannot write in any case you want. Identifiers can be in any length, and identifiers cannot use keywords and reserved words. So we'll be covering keywords and reserved words. We'll list out all those things. So you'll understand you cannot use them as an identifier. Some of the valid identifiers looks like this. Start with a character, dollar sign, string and then string. The invalid one cannot start with a number, cannot have false. False basically is again a keyword. Long is a keyword. You cannot have package. Alright. So these are invalid identifiers. So understand why the name identifier is given to it, and where do you use identifiers, and what are the rules that we have when you define identifiers, and part of it what are valid identifiers and what are invalid identifiers. Let's do an example and understand one of the concept of case sensitive, whether to see whether identifiers can be case sensitive or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to head back to PHP training 6. We're going to create a 7th folder and we're going to say JavaScript syntax. We'll create a folder called identifiers, and then we're going to copy the bootstrap file there. Alright, let's open this up in the brackets. So we have to open the folder first. We'll change the folder to JavaScript language syntax. Then we have identifiers. We'll open this up. Okay, let's write a simple JavaScript and see whether JavaScript is case sensitive or not. Okay, so I'll say script. Okay, in this I'm going to write my JavaScript and I'm going to write alert. JavaScript is case sensitive. Okay, what I'm doing here is I'm writing alert A caps. So let's see what happens. Okay, there is no alert. If you go to inspect, there is an error, right? We don't know what is alert, right? And if you change it to small a and then refresh, let's understand what is alert, because this is JavaScript is case sensitive. Okay, you have to write in the same case as it is defined. Okay, and if you want to just define inline, right? So let's open this up. It's working fine. So when you click, nothing happens. When you see inspect and you have error, like whenever you click there's an error, right? So reason behind is basically alert. So let's change it back. Click refresh, click it and it works fine. right? So this shows that JavaScript is case sensitive, so be careful when you write JavaScript. It doesn't accept you use the same word in different case, because JavaScript is case sensitive. Alright, so understand what are identifiers and understand what are the valid identifiers and invalid ones, and what are the rules that you have to follow to define the identifiers. Alright, so that's all about identifiers in this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome to the lecture on variables and constants. So let's define our variables. So let's create one more folder for it. Okay, and let's understand how to define variables and store some value in it. Okay, we have to copy it over from this. So what we're going to do is we're going to just copy the text, open this in the bracket, copy and paste it here. Okay, let's define some variable and then we'll try to print them. Okay, so we understand how to define a variable. So we'll open our script tag, and this is the single line comment, and I'm saying declaring a variable. And how do you declare a variable? You say var and message. Var is a keyword which is used to declare a variable. Then how to initialize the variable with empty string. So message is equal to like this. This is how you basically initialize the variable. And how do you assign the value to a variable? Then you say message say hello to variables. Okay, don't forget the semicolon. You see everywhere I'm ending with a semicolon, right? And also there's no dollar sign like this, there's no sign. Whatever is your message, whatever is your variable name, we're just assigning it the same value to it. Okay, and how do you display? Okay, you can just say alert and just say message, right? So let's view this file, right? Say hello to variables. Fine, it works fine. You have a variable, you initialize it, you assign some value, and then you are displaying it. Okay, and I'll show you how to display them as a log. So if you go to inspect mode and if you go to console, I want to write it here, right? It's very simple. You just say console.log and you say message. So I did nothing, I just say console.log, which will write in the console. So if you just refresh the page and you can see say hello to variable, this is coming up from this line, right? Console.log is writing that variable and it is coming up and showing up in the console. Okay, so this is a way you can even log your messages. Let's try to play around with it. Let's define an integer variable counter and let's alert that. You can say counter before. Okay, how do you add a string to an integer, right? You're saying counter, so you're displaying an integer and you're displaying a string, right? Now you assign that back to the message and you can say counter before plus counter. Okay, you can do that. So I'm showing you different ways to play around with integer, string, and how do you store that in a variable, how to access that variable, and all those things, right? So if you just save this and refresh, okay, there's a counter is 0 and counter is 0 here as well. So now you can say counter is 100. Okay, and the third thing, we're just doing very simple operations here, nothing fancy. We're just trying to understand how to declare a variable, how to reassign a value, and how to display them. Okay, before and after is 100, and 0 and after is 100, right? You can write after, right? Looks good. Fine. How to define a constant? Very simple. You have a keyword called const, and we can assign the pi value to it. And the rest of it, right? And then how do you want to display them? You can say console.log of pi value, okay? And then when you print them, okay, you can see that value here. That's nothing but the constant. So constant is defined with a keyword or constant. Variable is defined with a keyword called var. Okay, it's very simple to understand how to define a constant and how to define a variable. Constant is defined with const, variable with var. Then you have learned about how to display the messages in the console.log and how to define integer and how to define a string, right? This is just a string. And then how do you attach them into a variable? Let's say you have this message variable. How do you attach an integer and a string together? That is with the plus sign. Okay, so let's play around some more things here. Let's see. Okay, and I want to put a script tag here, right? And I'm gonna say script type JavaScript, okay, inside the body, and I want to write and access this message. Okay, is it possible that when you define a variable somewhere in the page, in the script tag, somewhere in the top, can you access them in the page? That's what I'm trying to show you here. So how do you write something onto the web page? You use document.write. Let's say your message, and you assign the variable. Alright, so document.write is basically you're trying to write some content onto the HTML page. Okay, so here is your message. You have your string and you have attached a variable to it, and this variable is coming up from the script section, right? And then you have used a plus as an operator to combine two strings together, string and a variable together. Okay, and this is the output you will see on the web page. So let's open that file. Right, you can see your message, and then you can see this message is coming up from the message variable, right? This is a variable that you have defined it on top, and based on the operations and the text that you have assigned is displayed onto the web page. So you can see you can define a variable, you can assign anywhere in the page. Make sure you are writing some script tag. You can only access them inside the script tag. You cannot do this from outside because it doesn't understand what is this. This is a variable defined in JavaScript, so it has to be inside the script. Okay, so remember that and don't get confused of how to access a JavaScript variable in the HTML page. Okay, it should always be inside the script. It doesn't work outside the script. Alright, so that's all about variable and constants, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on primitive data types. So there are three primitive data types. So let me show you that. Okay, so there are three primitive data types: number, string, and boolean. Okay, number is used to store whole number, positive, negative, and decimal numbers. String is used to store characters, and boolean is to store true and false values. Okay, number is represented with numbers, and string is with double quotes and single quotes, and then boolean is basically with true or false. Okay, so let's write a program to understand this. So we have let's open that file. Here is your boilerplate. Assign it here. Okay, so let's define those three primitive data types: number, string, and boolean. Okay, we're gonna write some operations here and we'll try to understand that. So the first is we will understand numeric data type, which is var counter is equal to 0 and counter is equal to counter plus 100. So I'm doing an add operation here using the plus symbol, right? And I'm going to write in the console log. Okay, we have learned this, how to write console log. It will be visible when you go to inspect of your web page, go to console, you can find this text. So I'm saying counter. And how do you combine a string and a variable? You just use plus sign and the variable name. Okay, let's do a decimal now. Decimal count is equal to 1.45, and then we'll simply say decimal count is equal to decimal count plus 74.32. okay, then we will can say decimal counter here, right? So this is decimals. Then we'll do strings. So we'll strings could be in single quote or double quotes. Okay, to strings you can attach some value, and you can single quote or double quote. I'm not adding a dot in the last. Then you can print this in the console log. Okay, then you have boolean variables, and you can say var flag is equal to true. Okay, then we'll say console.log flag value flag. All right, so now we have defined numeric, decimals, string and boolean, right? And flag is basically assigned with true, or you can assign with false as well. Okay, and if you notice, this is all written in the console.log. So we'll verify the log console.log to see the output. So we open up the primitive. There's no output here. Output will be in the console log. So right click and say inspect, go to console. So you can see counter there. So let's open our code. That's the counter integer. Then you have decimals, then you have string, and you have this dot in the last, and then you have your boolean variable. All right, so those are the primitive data types that we have seen: numeric, decimal, string and boolean. And also there are some operations that you can do with these primitive data types as well. All right, so that's all in this lecture on primitive data types, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on assignments. So let's look at the assignment operator. So previously 2 sections was on keyword and reserve words. So I'm gonna say 3, 4, 5, and this is gonna be the 6th one. All right, so let's do an assignment operator here. You take the boilerplate code, put it here, right? So we'll define one variable here. We say var counter is equal to 10. Okay, this itself is an assignment operator. Okay, you are assigning some value to a variable. So in the body section, we say assignment expressions, and we'll define a link here, and on click of that event, okay, we're gonna increment the counter. So we're gonna say counter is equal to counter plus 1 semicolon, and then we will write that counter. we just say counter here. All right, and with a semicolon, close it. I'm gonna say increment counter. All right, so this code is incrementing counter by 1 and printing it. So we have to watch out the console.log, and you can see the assignment operator is in operation now. Okay, there's another assignment operator is this, which will increment by 1. We can use that. Plus is equal to, and we'll say plus is equal to increment by 1. Okay, so it's counter is equal to counter plus 1. All right, and you can even do by 1, by 2, right? And how do you do by 2? You can use 2 here. All right, so let's run this assignment. Okay, we'll add a break here. Right, let's open our console. We increment by 1. The variable is incrementing because we started with 10, it's 11, 12 and 15 and 16. Now it increments by 2, right? By 1, by 2, by 1, by 2. And you see the web page is able to understand what is a counter variable. Okay, and it's actually saved that variable somewhere in the memory, and when you click that again, it know it is saved at 41. It has to reuse from 42. It's not going back at 10 and redoing it. When it will go back to 10, when you will refresh the page, it will go back to 10. When you click again, like all the operations again that you're doing will start from 10 again, right? Like 10, 11, 12, 19, and when you refresh, it go back to 10. So that's 12, right? So it's remember the state when the page is not been refreshed, but when you refresh, it basically clean off its existing memory, and then you start creating the new variables and start from there. Okay, so you have to understand this concept, very, very important. When the variables will get refreshed on the JavaScript, whenever there's a refresh happens, all the memory arrays, all the primitive data types, anything that you have stored it here on the variable level will be wiped out, and then when the refresh happens, everything gets loaded from the starting initial value. All right, so this is the examples that you help you understand how to use assignment operator, right? Assignment is equal to and then plus is equal to, but we have understood also about how the variable will behave in the web page as well. All right, so that's all about assignment expression, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on comparison expressions. So let's create a folder for it. Let's create a file. All right, so let's open that up. Use our boilerplate code. Okay, I'm going to remove this internal from here as well. All right, so let's understand what is comparison expression. So we haven't done if conditions and switch conditions. Those will be statements, but there's an operator I want to show you for comparison. Okay, and the operator is called as condition operator, which is nothing but also called as ternary operator. So we'll say counter is equal to 10, and I'm gonna say result value. So this is a ternary operator, and we're gonna assign the counter if it is counter is less than equal to 10. Okay, then we'll assign 10 or 0. Okay, this is also called as conditional ternary operator. All right, so let's do some more here. Comparison. I'm going to print those counters down here in the page. And say counter, right, and also I'm saying the result value. There's nothing up but this one. Okay, so let's understand this. So we have written a variable and we are doing a ternary operator to say less than 10. This is basically true condition and false. If this condition is true, this value is assigned to this value. If the condition is false, then this value is assigned to this. Okay, because it is equal to, it's true, it's less than, and equal, it's equal to 10, so 10 will be assigned to the result value. If the value is really greater than 10, then the 10 is assigned, or else 0 is assigned. Okay, so we change the value to greater than. Let's see what happens. And here, down here in the body, we're just writing the variables. We're writing the counter variable and result variable. Alright, so compare this 10 and result value is 0. Alright, simple to understand. Understand this operation called as ternary operator, using which you can compare things. Alright, so that's all about comparison operator, and I'll see you in the next one. Well, and welcome to the lecture on arithmetic expression. So in this arithmetic expression, this plus symbol is called as arithmetic operator. Okay, an arithmetic expression always evaluate into a single value. So all this operation on the right hand side will be assigned to the on the left hand side. Alright, so plus, in this example, plus is the arithmetic operator which adds to value. There are other arithmetic operation like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, increment, decrement, and the order of precedence means which operator will evaluate first. So from left to right, this operators has the higher priority: plus, plus, minus, multiply, divide, and modulus, and then plus and minus. Okay, so if you have to increment a variable, then you use this arithmetical operator. Okay, which actually means counter is equal to counter plus 1. We have seen this operator, right? We have seen plus, and also we have seen other operators. Let's do an example to understand this much better. Okay, so let's go to arithmetic operator. We can copy the bootstrap file. All right. Let's save this files. Let's write the script tag here. So let's try to understand the arithmetical operator. Let's define a variable counter and write it in the console. What is the initial value of that counter, right? Then we'll use some arithmetical operator of plus, right? We have incremented it, and down below we'll try to access them. And we have seen this example previously, so I'm going to use the same example here just to show how the arithmetical operator and which are the arithmetical operators here. Okay, so we have counter plus plus, that's one of the arithmetical operator, and then we will log it, the counter value, and then we will say increment counter, then we'll say minus minus to decrement the counter. All right, very simple example. You have some arithmetical operators used in this program, just to make sure you understand how to use arithmetical operator. So we can look at the console now, right? So we are incrementing, we are decrementing, and you see it's back to 10 again, and again you increment, then you decrement. Okay, So you're playing around with the variables here, right? We have defined a variable and then we are trying to control that variable, increment and decrement it using the arithmetical operators. And as we have seen, there are other arithmetical operators. You can even write a calculator operations like you're doing addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, very simple operations, right? And then you can use this operator to do those operations. Okay, so that's all about arithmetical expressions and operators, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome. Let's look at the logical expression. So if you go to next section, let's review the logical expression. So in this expression, the ampersand is called as logical operator, which is also called as AND operator. The logical operator is to check the condition, right? If the condition is true or false based on many conditions. So if it is left and right, then you have put the logical operator here. You are basically checking if this is true and this is true. True and true is true. True and false is false. And false is false. Because AND means both sides, it has to be true. Similarly, apart from AND, you also have OR and NOT. OR is basically true false is true and false true is true. False is false and true is true. So you can use this operator to decide some logical operation. Okay, and order of precedence is not AND or OR. Okay, let's do an example to understand how to work with logical operators. So I'll create a folder. Let's copy that file. Let's open our brackets and open that file. Okay, so we will write the script tag. And inside the script tag, we'll define some inputs. Okay, this time we will prompt something for user to input it. And how do you write prompt when window into the web page? You have something called as prompt, right? And this is basically accepts a value, and whatever value is entered will be stored in this variable. Okay, but I'm going to show you the demo so you'll understand how to work with this. Okay, we are accepting two values from the user, right? The user has to enter first value and the second value. Okay, and then we'll try to do some operations here. Okay, the result is, we're gonna say if input 1 is less than input 2, or the input 1 is equal to input 2, then we'll assign that result. Okay, so this is the logical operator here making some decisions. Then we'll try to print that in the output. Okay, and how do you print it? You can use document dot write. Okay, we'll say input 1 less than equal to, that's what we are doing, less than and equal to input 2 is, and then we can say what is the result. Right, so here is a logical operator which is trying to decide whether this is true and whether it's false. Okay, this true and true conditions we are checking with the logical operator, and we'll accept two values from the user. All right, so it's just finding out which one is bigger, 12, 14. When you say 12 is less than 14, it's true, right? Let's do 14 and 12. Okay, 14 is less than or equal to 12 and it's false. We're just trying to compare things. So 10 and 20. So 10 is less than 20, true, right? You reverse 20, 10, 20 is less than 20, which is false. All right, nothing fancy here. We're just using prompt default method to get that prompt, right? Get this prompt box, and whatever you enter here will be is coming up from this text, and whatever you enter it here will go and sit in this variable. Okay, and using this variable, I'm using logical operator here to compare between these two variables. Okay, and I'm just using document.write to print that output. Okay, so that's all about logical operator. Play around with it, do some other operations, and I've shown you, or you can do and here, and then you can play around with logical operators. Okay, so that's all for this lecture. I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on string operations. So let's do a string operation. So before that, we go to our document and we'll understand from here what are the operators. So there are two operators, plus and plus is equal to, and you can use, we have seen this previously, how to combine two strings together, combine string to a variable. We have used this plus operator, that is a string operator. Okay, and then we have some methods as well for to play around with the string. We have index of to find the index, substring to chop the string, and also to lowercase and to uppercase. Okay, you can simply say variable name dot to lowercase and the string will be converted to lowercase. Okay, so let's do an example and just to understand how to work with string operations. Copy paste this, right? Okay, so here again we will take two inputs. So we'll go back here. I'm going to copy paste this code which has accepting the input values from the user, and I'm going to say first value, I'll say first name, and second name. Okay, then I'm going to use the operator to combine string together. So I'm going to say var, that is nothing but defining of the username, so I'm gonna I can add the HTML code in it, and I'm gonna put the welcome string here. Input 1, right? And I can say input 2. Now I can close the strong tag. Okay, you can see how I'm creating a string, right? And these are the operators I'm using. I'm using the plus operator to combine the variables and also strings together. Okay, and then you can nicely show the string, welcome string, in the body tag now. Right, so let's open this up. So I'm going to say John Smith, then you can say welcome John Smith. Okay, whatever you're going to enter here, first name, last name, then you can say welcome first name and last name. Okay, this is basically the string operation, right? You're combining strings together, and that's how you do it with the plus symbol. Okay, you cannot even combine the variables that is of type different data types like number and also decimals. You can even combine two strings together. Okay, so that's all for this lecture on string operation. I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the code section. So quotes is basically, I'm trying to explain you how to handle single quotes and double quotes and how you can put it in the string. And this can be done with something called as escape character. The escape character is this /, using which you can escape any single quotes or double quotes. Using this escape character, you can even write new lines, right? And also you can escape double quotes when you are writing inside the double quotes. Okay, so let's do an example to understand this. We'll call it quotes. Right, so let's write a string here. Define a variable called site name. Okay, and I want to have this. Okay, and let's say I'm using single quotes. Okay, and you see here, it's not able to understand the next part of the string. Okay, that's where you add the escape character. Okay, when you add the escape character, now it all becomes as in string, and then that character has been escaped in the whole string. Okay, and with a single quote. Okay, now you try to print this out. And you should be able to see the exact output. Okay, you're able to see the single quote here. Even though you have enclosed it with single quotes, it's able to escape that character. Okay, and if you put /n, what do you think? Will you have a new line on the HTML page? And how do you typically write a new line on HTML page? If you know HTML by now, you should know there will not be a new line, because this new line is not for your web page, right? It doesn't accept new line here. Okay, or it's only possible with the BR. All right, and if you want to have these conditions, and you're basically doing console.log, and then your refresh, and then you go to console, you can see the new line appearing here. So this kind of new lines is for your console, not for your web page, right? Your web page need to have a BR tag here, not the new lines. The new lines, when you add it, the console.log will accept that new lines. All right, so that's all about how to work with quotes, how to use the escape sequence character, and you can add these special symbols here like tab and also carriage data and all those things. All right, so that's all about the codes, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the Boolean expressions. So let's create a folder. Okay, and then we'll copy paste our Boolean here. All right, so let's open that file. So we'll define a Boolean condition here. We'll define a result of an operation 2 greater than 1. So this is basically a Boolean operation. So whatever value, the Boolean value is assigned to that result, and based on that variable, right, we can choose to have a string. So if there's a Boolean operation result, if it is true, then you want correct or you want wrong, right? Remember, this is a Boolean variable now, and the condition is true or false based on this operation. So whatever operation returns true or false will be stored in this Boolean variable, and based on that Boolean expression, whether it's true or false, whether it's true it becomes correct, false it becomes wrong. Okay, let's see the output. So we say message. Okay, we just print the output. So it's correct that 2 is greater than 1. If you say 2 is less than 1, then it is wrong. Okay, because the Boolean operation is basically captured, and is captured via the Boolean variable. All right, so that's all. You basically use Boolean variables, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on arrays. So let's create a file for array. Let's copy this. Let's create a folder. We call it as arrays. All right, let's open that file. Okay, let's understand how to define an array. So we'll define a color array. Okay, and you can define an array with the square brackets. Inside the square brackets, you can define the array of values. You can say white, black, green, and low, right? The array is defined inside the square brackets, right? And then this, you can have multiple values inside it, separate with a comma. Okay, and how do you access the array? So let's try to print everything that we can access the arrays. We can first, we'll say color array. We'll see how the color array looks like. So if you open up the array, inspect console, so it's array of 4 and 4 values in it, right? Then how do you say console.log colors array dot length? Okay, there's no parenthesis and the array is 4, length is 4, right? Then how do you access the elements of an array? You can say 0. So the index starts with 0, and if it's 0, then the third is the last element. Okay, so black, white, green and blue. Okay, let's say you want to change one of the array element, then you can say, let's say you want to change the 0th element, right? This you want to change it to red, and you want to see this, so you see the white become red. And how you want to add it? Let's say you want to add a new value, you don't know what is the length, just go with the last length. Say gray, right? Now you have gray in the array. Okay, so this length is basically always starts with 1, so length will be 4 and array index starts with 0. Okay, so we have seen how to create an array, how to access the array length, how to access the elements of an array, how to change the existing value, and how to create a new element in an array. Alright, so play around with it and have fun with arrays in JavaScript. Alright, so that's all for the lecture on arrays, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on date and time. Let's create a folder for date and time. Call it date. Right, so let's open up date and let's start writing the date and time. Let's access date and time and some of the properties of date and time. So I'm going to say today variable, and there's a method called date, right? And you have to say new date because this is a class, you have to create an instance of it. And once you create, now today is basically an object of a date, and via the today you can access some of the methods of that date class and print those values in the console or on the web page. Okay, so let's print them on the console first. So we say today dot, okay, to date string. Okay, the next method we can have is get full year. Then you can actually get the date as well, right? Again, open and close. Then you can even get minutes, month, month. Let's do the another scripting in the body tag. Okay, this time I don't have to create an instance of it, I can just directly use document.write. Today I can access that, right? And I can even print the same thing here. Right, instead of console.log I'll say document.write. right? And these things doesn't have a new line, so I have to write new lines here. Alright, very simple, nothing fancy here. I'm just writing in the console and also I'm writing on the web page. So if you open up the page, you can see the date, year, month and the date, right? Full year, date and basically the month. Okay, so it's so simple. Once you have create an instance of a date, then you can actually access time, minutes, seconds, hours, anything that you want, milliseconds, everything can be accessed with this. Okay, so it's so simple. You have to just create an instance of a date class, and via that instance you can access all the methods of the date in JavaScript. Alright, so that's all about an example on how to access date and time in JavaScript, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on if statements. So if statements are used to check a condition, right, and make a decision based on the result of a condition. Okay, and it can choose some actions when the condition is true and also some, take some action when the condition is false. And you can also do nested of multiple conditions together and decided what action to be taken when some group of conditions are true or false. How to write if condition is as simple as that. You have to just write if, then you have to open parenthesis, close parenthesis, some condition, boolean condition, then open the flower brackets, then you can start writing else if and then else, right? Else if is basically this true, you execute this, true or false, you execute this, then the else basically is the default condition. Okay, a very simple example, if you're checking for a marks greater than 35, so you say if marks is greater than 35, then you alert you are passed, else you try again. Okay, you can even have multiple conditions here. Okay, we try this simple condition, right? If marks is less than 35, and then we'll see how to write if conditions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create if, okay, and then we're going to copy paste the bootstrap file, right? Go to our brackets. Okay, nothing fancy, we just copy that code and to understand how to write if conditions. Okay, very simple, nothing fancy here. We have defined the marks variable, marks is equal to 40. Okay, now the marks is 40, and then we are checking if this marks is greater than 35, then you are passed, or else you try again. Okay, you have to change it to double quotes, right? And then else, right? Else can be like this, or it can be attached. You can follow the new line, but from a programming standpoint, this looks good. Okay, it starts, flower bracket starts here, and if has an open and close and parenthesis, and then you can check any boolean condition inside the parenthesis. Alright, so let's run this, then say you are passed, right? And if you change the condition, let's say you have got 30 marks or 20 marks, then you try again. Alright, so that's very simple to write if condition. I'll show you one more example. I'll copy one more example here. Let's open that up. Okay, is an example where it prompt you enter the date of the week. So if you type Monday or month, it will tell you first day of the week, then second day of the week, midweek, preparing for weekend, it's Friday, enjoy day and resting day, and cannot find the value. Very simple, but most of the thing I want you to think about is how to write this if condition with multiple else ifs. Okay, and then in the last you have else, then inside this you can use the logical operator as well. Okay, so once you execute this, it will ask you for, let's say, Friday, right? So it says Friday. You can say Sunday, it's a resting day, then it's Monday, first day of the week, then Wednesday, so it's a midweek, right? It's just to understand how to write an if condition and how to play around with this syntax. Okay, it's very simple. You have an if, then you have a condition, open, close parenthesis, then you close and open with a flower brackets. For else if there is a space, don't combine it as one word, else and if is have different words, so you have a space. In the last you have else. Okay, so that's all you write the if condition. Okay, so that's all about the if statements, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on switch statements. Switch statements are also equal to if statements, which is basically used to check a value and make a decision based on the result of that matching the value. And how you do it, basically have a word called switch, that is nothing but the keyword. How you write if, you have to write switch, then you have to write your variable name, and then you have whatever value that you are giving it here, you have to give it with a case. So if variable value is 10, then that case which matched, then that statement get executed. Then you have to apply something called as break to break that switch case and come out of this case. Okay, a good example is day of the week. If the day of the week, the string value we are comparing as Monday, then you alert with welcome Monday. If it's Tuesday, welcome Tuesday, and then you are doing rest of the conditions. The most important thing that you have to understand from switch statements, you have to put a variable here, then case is nothing but checking your condition, and once you finish putting all the statements, you have to apply the break. And for default, like else, for the if condition, you have a keyword called default, and once you put the default, whatever you put it here means any case that is not been matched will be sent to default, and from there all the statements will get executed. Okay, so let's look at an example of switch statement. So let's create that 16. Okay, so let's open that up. So I copied the switch code. Well, this is a lengthy code. I want to spend time on explaining rather than typing this out. Okay, so we have a script tag, and inside we have a variable where you will accept what is the day of the week, and then we are changing it to lowercase so that we can put our conditions here now, and we don't have to check upper and lowercase. Then in the switch statement, you are putting that variable, right? You in the if condition you put the condition, but in the switch you put the variable, and the conditions are here. Your case are basically your conditions. You are saying if this variable value matches with this, then in that result variable add this string and do a break, right? Similarly you do everything. If none of the string matches, just put say cannot find value, right? And in the down below in the body section, we are basically printing out that result. So whatever is the result here, we are printing that out. Okay, so let's execute that. Okay, if you are entering something else, then cannot find that value. If you are like entering Monday or Monday, then it can find it. So you have to type the full name Sunday, then it's a resting day, and it's coming up from this conditions here. It's another way of writing the conditional statements, right? You have a variable, you can check multiple conditions, not even strings, but you can check the numbers and booleans as well. All right, so that's all about the switch statements, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on the while loop. So let's write the while loop. Let's understand the syntax and how to write a loop with while. Okay, let's open our bootstrap here. So this is our boilerplate. So yeah, we'll leave it like this. We'll write the while loop here. Okay, we'll define a counter here, and the keyword is called as while, open close parenthesis, and then you have your flower brackets. So you have your flower brackets here. In this while you have to put a condition. So we'll say counter is less than equal to 10. Okay, and in this condition the counter will never be 10, right? It's always be 0. So what you have to do is you have to increment the counter. So you say counter plus plus, right? You have done this. Now you can go ahead and print it. Console.log, the counter value is counter, right? You can even do this in the statement itself. Okay, so this is one way of writing the while loop. You have something called as do while loop, where you start with do, means there's no condition, but you have a condition where you have another condition at the bottom, right? And you decide whether to redo the same loop. So first time it executes without any condition, you check for the second time. Okay, and you can say counter is less than equal to 10, and make sure after the while you have semicolon. Here you don't need a semicolon, right, but you need a semicolon after the while. Okay, and what you have to do is you have to re-increment the counter, means you have to initialize the counter to 0, right? And now you can do the same thing here. Okay, start printing the counter. Okay, so nothing fancy here. You have a while loop and do while. While you have a condition, until this condition is met, this loop will execute. If you put true, it becomes infinite loop, will never exit out of this loop, and till this is true, this while loop get executed. So you have this increment here, so every time the counter is 1 2 3 4 and then 10. Once it is 10, it has come out of that while loop. For even though it is value is 10, this will be executed, but we have anyway initialized it, and then it will go inside this loop and again execute for 10 times, right? So let's do that example. Go to inspect, right? So if you look at here, it's 0 to 10 and then 0 to 10. Okay, so we are able to execute the while loops and do while loops inside the HTML page. Alright, so that's all about while loops and do while loops. Alright, so do some exercises and get some hands-on on this while loops. Alright, so that's all for this lecture, and see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on for loop. So we have seen while, let's do a for loop. Let's open this up. Let's copy our bootstrap. So we'll write our script tag. We'll define one counter variable. Okay, we don't need to define, let's define it for the for loop. So you write the for loop like this. You have 3 parts to it: initialize, and then condition, and then you have operations, right? This is basically increment or decrement operation. Right, that is your syntax for loop. So let's initialize a variable. So we'll say counter is equal to 0. Counter is, condition is still it is less than equal to 10, right? We'll increment it to counter plus plus, and then we'll open and close it, and then we'll console.log the counter. Okay, working with for loop is very easy. You just have to understand the syntax. So when you do the operations, when you want to write a loop, then there's the syntax how to write the for loop. Okay, this is for loop, then your counter is equal to 0 and counter is less than 10, then you have counter plus plus. So for every loop, this will execute for the first time. Okay, this will not always assign counter to 0. Every time these two will be executed. Okay, the counter plus plus will execute after it finishes this loop. It come back here, it ignores this will be executed only for one time. Then the next time it basically checks the condition, whether the condition is met or I should start doing the operation. And before doing that operation, anyway the counter plus plus have incremented, right? Once it reach to this level, again it come back and check for this condition, right? If the condition is met, then basically go down. If the condition is not met, then it is come out of the loop. Okay, so let's run that, and we should able to see in the console 0 to 10. All right, because we initiated from 0, it is starting from 0. We initiate from 1, then it starts from 1 to 10. Alright, so the most important thing you have to understand is how to write a for loop and how to work with it. You can even now you change it to counter greater than equal to 0. So till it is 0, iterate the counter and you're decrementing, so you're printing from 10 to 0. Okay, so that's from 10 to 0. Alright, so you can increment it, decrement it, you can put any operations here you want. Okay, you can not only count up that variable, that is, you can use any variables that you want to do an operation here. Alright, so that's the syntax for loop, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome to the lecture on things to remember. Let's do a quick recap of what we have learned in this section. Well, we started off with identifiers, and identifiers are the name that we give to variables, functions, objects, properties, and events. Then we have looked at what are the roles of the identifiers and how to write identifiers. Then we looked at variables, like variables are used to store information which are used inside the program. We have defined some of the variables and we have also used them. There are three primitive data types that we have seen. We have seen number data type, string data type, and also boolean data type. And part of the keywords also, I've given you the list of all the keywords that should not use to define as a variable, nor you should use as an identifier. Alright. Then we looked at expressions like assignment, comparison, arithmetic, logical. Okay, we have seen all these expressions and we have done some exercise as well on this. Then we looked at string operations like plus sign, plus and is equal to, which is used to append the string. Then we looked at the escape sequence to escape the single quotes, double quotes, some special characters inside your string. You can use this escape sequence. Then we have looked at boolean data type, and also we looked at array literals and array objects, how to define an array, how to access an element of an array, how to find the length of an array. We have looked at all the different types of handling arrays in JavaScript. Then we looked at how to use date and time, how to print date, how to print a specific day or month, or or date time stamp for a specific day. We looked at all those things via the function called as state. And also the statement, we have looked at if conditions, switch conditions, while loop, and for loop. And also we have done some exercises to understand how to write these of the statements. Well, these are the lectures that we have seen in this section, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the summary section for JavaScript language syntax. Let's look at the things that you should know by now. By now, you should be able to understand the language basics like identifiers, variable and constants, primitive data types, keywords, and reserved words. And you should also know how to work with operators like assignment operator, logical, string, quotes, boolean arrays, and date and time. Also in the statements, you should understand how to write if conditions, switch statements, while loop, and for loop. And also in the language syntax, you should understand how to work with JavaScript. Alright, so these are the topics that we have covered in this section. I hope you understand how to work with all these things in JavaScript. Alright, so that's all for this section. I'll see you in the next one.